This is a public service announcement with guitar. Happy 40th anniversary to Combat Rock, the last Clash album that matters. We don't talk about Cut the Crap. Cut the Crap isn't real. Cut the Crap can't hurt us. If the band won't acknowledge it's real, then I won't acknowledge it's real either. So, Combat Rock, the final Clash album with the popular lineup of Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Topper Headon, and Paul Simonon, which was released on this date, May 14th, of 1982. Thus, the band's career, as limited by their albums, is about 5 years long. Tack on some tours before and after, you got 5 or 6 years of the only lineup that matters. We don't talk about that other lineup. That lineup can't hurt us. But moving on to the actual album, which will be the topic of today's episode. Sorry, it's a little later than usual. There's been some haywireness going on in my life, but we're back and ready to rock and roll. And speaking of Combat Rock and Roll, which is not the album's title, it's just Combat Rock, but its title could have been Rat Patrol from Fort Bragg. That was the working title for Combat Rock for some time. I feel like it would not have been as much of the hit album it was with a weird title like that. Just saying. Like, that doesn't even sound like a Clash album title. I mean, you've got Give 'Em Enough Rope and, London Calling and Sandinista. Like, they've all got these fairly short titles, so Rat Patrol from Fort Bragg would have just thrown everybody off, personally. So, that side note aside as to what the title of the album could have been, we'll dig into the content on the album with some fun backstories to the songs, personal interjections as to which ones are my favorites and not so favorites too, but mainly facts about the songs. So it starts off with the public service announcement with guitars, Know Your Rights, which is about as stick it to the man as you can get. Like, it's just, sneering at the whole rights that you have that you don't have. We still can have problems with those these days. Though according to Joe, nobody understood that, and that they weren't getting that it was ironic, and that was make him angry. Though there's no date with that quote, it's in the Big Pink Clash book, and part of me just feels like it has a very post-Combat Rock release, probably post-exit of Mick Jones vibe, because Joe was really snippy in interviews around then, understandably so. It was in a regular pressure cooker between the factors of his band and in that general period of the Clash breakup and afterwards, losing both of his parents, becoming a father. Like, there was a lot going on in Mr. Strummer's life, so we'll give him a break for being a bit snippy and a bit down on people's perception of this song, because I feel like most people got that it was ironic. No one would suspect that Joe would write lyrics about you only having 3 rights and be in earnest, given that, he's such a advocate for human rights across the globe, across the board, everybody having them, and it, so it just doesn't fit his character for these lyrics to not be ironic. So the fact that that was sort of lost on people, I don't know how people could lose that one. So we'll forgive him for being snippy because, he's trying to captain a ship that's missing several vital pieces if Mick and Topper are gone by the time he gave that interview, and it's taking water. So just, Combat Rock. That is the sadness that is this album, is that it's, it's not even the beginning of the end, it's like the literal end, especially because they sacked Topper right before they went on the tour for the album, and as Joe said, they didn't play a good gig without Topper Headon on drums, so it's understandable, because Topper doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves, though he does get one shining moment on this album, and we'll get to that in a couple songs. If you know, you know. But the next song is Car Jamming, which, as Mick notes in his contribution to the special issue of Armageddon Times that's in the Sound System box set, the Lauren Bacall reference came from the fact that he had seen her walking her dogs uh, outside of a hotel he was in Westwood. And the rest of the lyrics, though, are not nearly that chipper. It's really, you know, an astute observation on the underbelly of society as, seen from being stuck in a traffic jam, but also just in general. You've got everything from the drug-afflicted leperizing sword and, bodies in an icebox and cigar box homesteads to lyrics about Vietnam veterans and their Agent Orange color blindness and boots blown off in the 60s war, which there is some real life inspiration to that line because in 1979 the Clash did a benefit concert for disabled veteran Larry McIntyre of Cleveland. And I actually looked up the dude, and you can't really find anything about him other than his obituary from when he died in 2010. So here's this unsung hero living on in immortality in the Clash's discography because, they wrote a line or two about him and they did a benefit concert for him. I mean, I couldn't even find confirmation that it was the same dude, other than this dude was a disabled veteran who lost both legs in Vietnam. And, sorry about my phone alarm going there. But anyways, I couldn't find anything more about him other than he was a disabled veteran who fought in Vietnam and lost both of his legs and was from Cleveland and had the same name. So I assume it was the same dude, but like nobody was even mentioning in his obituary that, hey, the Clash did a benefit concert for this guy. But, he'll live on in the lines of Joe Strummer, as a few other, people do who are in that nucleus around the Clash and therefore have some shared immortality with them because the Clash's music is not going anywhere. I mean, clearly, as Don Letts said recently at the release of the 4K high definition version of Should I Stay or Should I Go Now from Shea Stadium, he's like, people are, digging the Clash that weren't even alive when they were doing their thing. And I'm like, we're getting to the point that people are digging the Clash who were born after Joe Strummer died because you're college freshmen this year, and, actually even younger than that, are 18, 19, 20, which means they were born after Joe Strummer died, which is a weird concept, but also refreshing that the music of the Clash is going nowhere. And that's as it should be. Hopefully they actually listen to the lyrics and try to live them out because that's some of the best stuff about the Clash. So, anyways, moving on from, car jamming and their immortalizing, a disabled veteran along with other observations on, society and how much it sucks. So we go from there to Popland. Let's be real. I love Should I Stay or Should I Go Now? Who doesn't? But it is far from the lyrical depth of many other Clash songs. It is still a great song though, and I will take no objections about it. Some people theorize that Mick's lyrics were inspired by his growing tensions inside the Clash with the other band members. Some people say it's about his girlfriend Ellen Foley, who incidentally provided backing vocals on Car Jamming. And also, more to her fame is the female half of the Paradise by the Dashboard Light duet on the Meatloaf song. So that's her other big claim to fame, aside from seriously dating Mick Jones for a while he was in the process of getting canned out of the Clash. So, let's hope she baked the poor boy some cookies, because it was not a pretty sight. Apparently he grew a beard and, just was trying to stay low for a little bit after being, brought low. But yet again, I haven't quite gotten there yet. They're on the edge. But anyways, some people theorize it's about his girlfriend Ellen Foley. But that doesn't quite stack up since they were still together, like a year later after that song was written, when, he got kicked out of the Clash. But anyways, it's according to Mick, it's just a, general universal kind of song. And to me, I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, it's like Train in Vain with a fresh twist. Like, there's a lot of sort of similarities, to me at least, between Should I Stay or Should I Go Now and Train in Vain. Like, there's sort of the dynamic of not sure what to do with her in a relationship, and it's kind of jaunty and fun. So it's like, a fresh perspective on Train in Vain, which, clearly, that being the other major hit for the Clash, sort of, at least to me, it gets played on the radio the most these days. It's hard to know what was actually a hit back then. Other than I know that this next song was the only number one hit that had that the Clash had in the United States, or rather not number one, but top 10 hit. I don't think it made the number one. It was like number 8 or 4 or 6 or somewhere. But the only top 10 hit for the Clash to have in the United States, and I'm sure you know what it is. Sharif don't like it. Yes, Rock the Casbah. Um, and it was written 90% by soon-to-be booted Topper Headon. Um, not your normal Clash songwriter, though apparently Joe found Topper's lyrics lacking and uninspiring. They were just like boy-girl based lyrics, and so unworthy that he literally crumpled up the piece of paper that they were written on with a dismissive, "How incredibly interesting," and then sequestered himself in the bathroom for a half hour, and emerged with the funnest, catchiest smackdown on theocratic dictatorship ever to grace the airwaves. Because a lot of the whole Sharif don't like it and general like music versus government authority came from the situation in Iran after the what's it called, the Islamic Revolution. Because it's weird, I've seen pictures from Iran like before 1979 when the Islamic Revolution took place, and like it's so liberated, and they look like a bunch of normal kids in the 70s. Like, they've got pictures from the college campuses and things like that I've seen. I'm like, that's so weird. Because, I mean, you just think about Iran being oppressed, because they kind of still are. Um, and so that the song was about some of the oppression, like the fact there was a poor dude who got flogged for owning a disco album. So, Lord knows how they felt about rock and roll. It's a little too powerful. So hence the theme of Rock the Casbah, and converting people to the side of music and art versus, dictatorship and death in the funnest way possible. Though, as misunderstood and misappropriated lyrics go, Rock the Casbah is right up there with Born in the USA for like, did anybody actually catch what this was about before you started using it for completely inappropriate things? Namely being the use of Rock the Casbah written on bombs dropped during the Gulf War by American soldiers, which deeply grieved all the band members. I can't remember if it was Joe or Mick, just like straight up cried about it. They're like, that's not why I wrote this song. It's not supposed to be on bombs that are potentially killing people. Like, that's not what this is about. So, kind of similar to, and way more severe actually than Born in the USA. I mean, having your song appropriated by a political party you don't agree with versus having your song appropriated to potentially kill other human beings. The Clash have cornered the "this is an outrage, how dare you do this with my music" market forever with that one. I don't think you can really top it. But yeah. Incidentally, as a side note, if you just look at Born in the USA lyrically, it totally fits the vibe of combat rock. So it's like the Boss just combat rock 2 years later, because it really kind of fits right between car jamming and Straight to Hell as far as the subject matter. So, abused veterans at home, the situations they encountered over in Vietnam, etc. Like, it's the Boss does combat rock. And, of course, Joe and Bruce were mutual admirers of each other, so hey, if Joe had lived, maybe they could have like done it on stage together in a Clash style, and that would have been beautiful. Maybe, maybe in heaven one day or something, because that would be a great scene. Anyways, moving on before I get sentimental about two of my favorite artists, we have Red Angel Dragnet, or it's a good thing Paul Simonon has convictions and is pretty because he cannot sing. Guns of Brixton was a better vocal performance than Red Angel Dragnet is. It's a good song, though. It's a very important topic. Um, of course, the topic has more to do with Joe's writing, because Joe's the one who wrote the lyrics, somewhat to the frustration of Paul Simonon, because for lack of, stationery, of like sheets of paper, Joe ended up writing the lyrics on an envelope that came at like the Iroquois Hotel, and there were so many lyrics that he just sort of kept going round and round the edge like 3 times. And so, Paul Simonon's trying to read the lyrics here and keeps rotating the paper, which honestly, I'm not the least bit wondering if that inspired how they did the liner notes for Combat Rock, because trying to keep up with which direction that piece of paper is supposed to be in order to read the lyrics, like, I swear, you turn around, you try to look at the next song, and it's upside down. So they decided to take that disjointed style that Joe Strummer had used to write the lyrics on the stationery and transfer that to writing the lyrics to all their songs for the liner notes. At least that's the way it is on the CD that came out of Sound System. I'm not sure how it was laid out for vinyl, but I think it might have been the same, roughly, just bigger. So anyways, that being said, clearly there was a carryover, or they just decided to be random with the lyrics on the liner notes. But the lyrics of Red Angel Dragnet are actually about there was a New York City group called the Guardian Angels, which sort of were somewhat of a vigilante group, helping keep people safe on subways and etc. And there was considered to be some friction between them and the police. For one, it makes the police department look bad when you have to have this other group of people trying to stop crime. And as the song points out, there's, too many criminals for the cops to keep up with. But what happened is one of the major members of the Guardian Angels, Frank Melvin, was shot by police in Newark, New Jersey under somewhat suspicious circumstances, as in, like, he was, supposedly there was a mix-up at a burglary, and so they shot him thinking he was the burglar, or that was their excuse. We'll never know in these cases. But that being the case, that was, freshly on the Clash's mind, as was their love of Martin Scorsese movies. Martin Scorsese also being a big fan of the Clash, and so they have Cosmo Vinyl sampling some lines from Scorsese's Taxi Driver about, the scum of the city and such. So, in personality, I know the alley. No, it's like the standout lyric of Red Angel Dragnet. No, the lyrics are good. I just can't quite get behind Paul Simonon's singing. I guess that's what. Sorry, like, I love Paul. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's a crucial member of the Clash. Just, he could have at least sang as well as he sang on Guns of Brixton. Like, that's the detractor to Red Angel Dragnet, is Paul's vocal performance. Otherwise, I'd like the song probably quite a bit more than I do. As it is, it tends to be one I skip, along with one we'll get to on Combat Rock. Now, to the double A side hit of, well, should have been hit, rather. I think it was the other side of Rock the Casbah. But Straight to Hell, which is one of Strummer's most stunning lyrical masterpieces, if you're asking me. Part of that is the music it is put to, because it gives room for you to really catch the feeling of his lyrics. But the lyrics are just, Joe had such compassion and a keen eye for injustice everywhere, like on any frontier, any hemisphere. He cares just as much about the half-American abandoned children in Vietnam as he does the mill workers in his native England or the impoverished heroin addicts in Junkiedom, USA. Like his this may not be true, but to me it's true as far as I know. There's no more humanitarian human ever to play music than Joe Strummer. I hear people arguing for Woody Guthrie in the background, who incidentally was a huge influence on Joe to the point that he went by Woody for a few years before he joined the Clash. Um, but even Woody wasn't as internationally minded as Joe. Joe cared about everybody everywhere. It's like they said posthumously after he died of the congenital heart defect. Uh, the heart of his always worked too hard. Like he cared about everybody everywhere. That's a lot of caring to do in a fairly ugly world. But Straight to Hell is such a good song. I mean, my brain trying to make, before I realized it was three separate things being talked about and trying to make it all one cohesive subject, thought that the song was about immigrants coming to a country and then the work drying up, because I think I was trying to wed the unemployed steel workers with the immigrant, and the other characters in the song. And even if it had been about immigrants coming to a country and then suddenly being unwanted because there's no work for them, because of recessions, because this is the 80s, that would have still been an incredibly compassionate song to have written. So either way, like Joe's compassion and heart for the world, they shame me because I'm like, I should care that much about other people. We all should. So, like I said, if you want to hear more on how awesome Joe Strummer was as far as a humanitarian and being a exemplary, kind individual, you can check out my episode Kindness Calling, which I am proud to say is my most listened to episode. I'm like, if I do nothing else for this world, maybe I got some people to think about being better people because I told them how good of a person Joe Strummer, wanted humanity to be. But moving on from my waxing lyrical over Joe Strummer, because y'all know I can do that, to side 2 of Combat Rock, which starts with Overpowered by Funk, which you are definitely going to be overpowered by funk by this song. Overpowered by Funk is funky. I'm a big fan of the Friendship Onion podcast with Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan from The Lord of the Rings, and they have this like how funky is it segment to their show, and I'm like, I need to send them Overpowered by Funk as a recommendation and see how funky they find it to be, because it's pretty funky. And its premise is funk is the solution to all problems in society, which, that's a decent theory. Like I was over here reporting that, government leaders should have guitar axe battles with each other to solve conflict. So funk offs. Sounds like a good deal to me. Good idea to me. The other sort of groundbreaking part of this is, bear in mind, Combat Rock comes out in 1982, early 1982. So these songs were written for the most part like in 1981. Some of them were written, right before it was released, I guess. But for the most part, these songs are 1981 or, dug up from some other time period before that. And so it's kind of groundbreaking when you have a guest appearance by a graffiti artist doing a rap. This is 4 years before Aerosmith and Run DMC will wed rock and rap, or hip hop, whichever term you prefer, together in Walk This Way. Like, this is revolutionary. Hip hop / rap is barely even an acknowledged genre in 1982. And here are the Clash immortalizing another peripheral figure, Futura 2000, by having him do a guest vocal performance with the rap that is in the latter half of Overpowered by Funk. And he basically is just sort of like his manifesto saying what he does, about, being a graffiti artist. Incidentally, Future 2000 will make other appearances in pop culture in a MasterCard commercial as well as in the music video for Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer. So he had other footprints in history, but I feel like Overpowered by Funk's probably one of the biggest footprints to the mass, world as to who this dude was. I mean, for one, he's telling us exactly what he does. So yet again, like the Vietnam veteran, like, Viv Albertine and Palmolive of the Slits, like there's all these peripheral figures that surrounded the Clash that got to be immortalized by the Clash, as in, like, people will always know who these people are, even if they don't know who they are. They will know, of them. They'll be in their consciousness, even if they don't know that the dude from the 60s war with his boots blown off was, Larry McIntyre, who they did a benefit concert for in 1979. Even if they have to go Google who the heck Futura 2000 was, and then, like, go to maybe be turned on to the graffiti art. Like, it's it's astonishing how generous they were with their attention. It wasn't like it's all us. It was, hey, it's us and all these other cool people. It's like the fact that, they'd get upset if the opener was booed off, especially if it was like an up and coming hip hop kind of artist. They're like, give them a chance. Like, Joe fully upbraided an audience for not doing that. I can't remember which artist it was, but I believe it was like a hip hop or rap artist. May have been reggae, but I think it was hip hop or rap. Opened for them and got some flack from the crowd, and Joe came out and literally was like, give them a chance, and was like hostile about it. And I'm like, righteous anger, market cornered by Joe Strummer. Like, the generosity of the Clash. Yet again, I could go off on a tangent and have done so in a whole episode about how awesome the Clash were, and especially Joe. But moving on from that to Adam Tan. What exactly the song is about is kind of unclear. A good guess is that the Clash is tackling one of the favorite targets of their own discography and punk in general, which is the mind-killing powers of television. And so you've got like this, general attack on the parade of real and fictitious violence on television that's just sort of numbing. You'll even get later on the last track on the album another sort of attack on or rather at least contemplation as to why we as human beings, enjoy violent films. So anyways, that's Adam Tan. Other than being a total bop, and possibly about hating television, or at least, being aware of its mind-numbing effects, not really totally sure what's it about. Now, the next song is very clear what it's about because it's on the title, Sean Flynn, which Sean Flynn was an actual person. He was a actor turned photojournalist, actually the son of Errol Flynn, the famed silver screen actor. And he went missing in Cambodia in like 1970 with a fellow photojournalist and was probably killed by, they were ambushed by members probably of the Viet Cong or one of the other, groups like that. And, probably killed, but by local reports that they were killed and executed in 1971, like about a year later. So, sad story, but the song is so poignant and almost eerie. It's a really good song. And even though this dude died, over a decade before, or at least went missing over a decade before Combat Rock came out, he's another one of those people that legacy is going to live longer under more limelight than it otherwise would have had because of the Clash. And, some of this, in fact, I want to say I read that Dennis Hopper's character in Apocalypse Now, yeah, that was a hard one to say, was actually based off of Sean Flynn's character. That's some conjecture I read when I was reading up on Mr. Flynn. So yeah, yet again, here I am, born 10 years after Combat Rock came out, and almost 30 now, discovering who Sean Flynn was because of the Clash. So, moving on from Sean Flynn. Oh, well, not quite moving on because we can't let that raga drop. The famed line that inspired the lyrics to Rock the Casbah was inspired by Sean Flynn, because originally it was supposed to be twice as long as it was. Glenn Johns, who, mixed and stuff, cut the song down. Somewhat at the behest of Bernie Rhodes, who was like, does everything have to be a bloody raga? And Joe filed away that word to open up Rock the Casbah. So, that's the other important impact of Sean Flynn. Now, the next song is Ghetto Defendant. Alternatively, a beat poet and enough cowbell to silence Christopher Walken, even. No, literally, Ghetto Defendant, Joe's vocal performance is amazing. I love his voice on this song. It's really emotional. It's got a good clarity to it. I, however, could do without beat poet Allen Ginsberg's drone. Like, that's my beef with Ghetto Defendant. It's a good song lyrically. Joe's voice is great. Even the very intense rapid fire cowbell is good. Mick Jones's harmonica is excellent. Everything about the song slaps other than the vocal contributions of Allen Ginsberg. Don't come at me. I know he's a famous beat poet. I just wish he would have beat it and not, been in this song. Maybe keep his lyrical contributions and have, I don't know. I'd rather have Paul Simon perform them even, I think. At least he's not a total monotone. I think that's my main beef, is that there's zero inflection. But anyways, and then Ginsberg did write his own like his parts in the song that he sings were written by them. So there is merit to that, there's a contribution from a famous poet on a Clash song. I just happen to object to his voice. Sorry about that, Mr. Ginsberg. And sorry about, derailing this song to be my personal opinion. But literally, Ginsberg's vocal contribution, as far as, non-Clash additions to Clash songs, is just above the 2000 Flushes commercial in Inoculated City, and a little below Cosmo Vinyl quoting Taxi Driver in Red Angel Dragnet, and way below Future 2000's, rap. That's the peak contribution, especially on this album from another artist. So, I'm just not that big on Ginsberg's voice, because it's so monotonous sounding. So, this song, unfortunately, I skipped a lot until I finally got, especially once you get past the intro where it's just him sort of maundering, then you get more of Joe singing, and the beat and the rhythm of the song picks up a little bit, which makes it more enjoyable. See, if you can get past the first part, then it's a pretty good song. It's just the first part is a pretty big turnoff. Anyways, on to one of my favorite songs, even if it does have the most random non-Clash contribution that nearly got them sued, is Inoculated City, which is the song with the 2000 Flushes toilet bowl cleaner commercial sample in it. It also got them in a little bit more than sparkling water, got them in some hot water legally, and they were skulking around USA trying not to get served papers over using the sample from the commercial, because I guess Fleshco Incorporated didn't appreciate the free publicity when it's being counterpoised as being a distraction and from wars and actual bad things going on in the world. It's like, oh, we're so desensitized. It's like Don Henley says in Dirty Laundry, she can tell you about the car crash with a gleam in her eye. Or they can tell you about wars in another country and then give you an ad for a toilet bowl cleaning commercial like this isn't totally incongruous. People are dying, but you're trying to sell me a product. And, so the Clash attacking television's mind-numbing, soul-killing, and otherwise, socially distancing on a soul level of humanity. It's basically, like, hey, be mindful of the fact that television is not necessarily good for your soul, or your compassion. So, that being, and it's also, about the blindly following government orders and using your superiors as an excuse. The Nazi, well, I was just following orders excuse does not fly with Mick Jones. This song became a little too relevant when right after it came out is when Great Britain got involved in the Falklands militarily for what reason we're still not exactly sure. So that was, a coinciding event. Even though it's 40 years later, we're still like, why was that a thing, Britain? Anyways, not judging them. We've been involved in our share of military events as a citizen of the United States, where I'm like, what were we doing? Why was that a thing? Oh, history. But anyways, moving on to the final song of combat rock and the little bookend for the Clash's career, Death as a Star, which is like a slow, almost like, sounds like Joe is by what will become one of his favorite places later in his life, a fireside. But it was even though it sounds almost like he's telling stories fireside, it's actually Joe ruminating on the morbidity of going to see violent films. Like, why do we go to see movies to watch other people die and are so desensitized to it? He ended up comparing it kind of to like and not education, execution. Well, public education, you can feel like execution depending on where you're going. But anyways, he ended up ruminating, and that was sort of the questioning of the song. So it's so cool to see that as much as Joe is out there questioning, foreign powers and governments and, their policies and the state of the world and drug crises, he's also over here internally examining himself, being like, why do I enjoy movies with violence? Is that a good thing to do? And so Death as a Star, to me, just sort of, it's the perfect way to end the Clash's career as we know it, because it's like this dying flower, and from the seeds of it, you're gonna feel a little bit connected to what Joe will do with in the Mescaleros about 20 years later, a little less than 20, but it really sort of brings it together. Like, you see the seedling, the seeds dropping that will become the sprouts that will be some of, the style that he uses in the Mescaleros. Kind of like a much more quicker germination with Inoculated City and Adam Tan having some very strong tangs of Big Audio Dynamite, which would be Mick's post-Clash project that had some success. So yeah, it's, it's a good swan song for the band as we know it. Because, let's be real, it's the last album that matters. Cut the Crap isn't a real album. It's not mentioned in the big pink Clash book that the band put out. It's not part of the Sound System box set that Paul Simon and Mick Jones, and I think Topperhead too, compiled. Several Clash books just sort of don't acknowledge it at all, or just easily put it in as like a 3-page footnote that it happened. To me, the only standout part about the Cut the Crap era of the Clash is their cool little busking tour they did of England, which honestly, as ways for the Clash to end goes, their last tour being a busking tour seems more appropriate than their last tour being the blockbuster combat rock tour and the US Festival and stuff, which was the last tour that they had, with Mick Jones. Because, as much as sacking Topper was a serious takeaway from the Clash, you can't have the Clash without Mick Jones. Like I was saying earlier, Joe was trying to pilot a boat that was missing some, pretty essential parts. I mean, you got rid of Topper, you got rid of the rudder, you got rid of Mick, you got rid of the steering wheel, the mast, and half the hull. Mick is pretty much just as important to the Clash as Joe is. So, that being said, I'm not saying Mick was innocent and didn't sort of do some things that precipitated his sacking, but still, the Clash isn't the Clash without Mick Jones, the same way the Clash wouldn't be the Clash without Joe Strummer. So, Combat Rock is the last album that matters. Cut the Crap isn't real. It can't hurt us. Band won't acknowledge it, I won't acknowledge it. But anyways, I hope y'all enjoy this 40th anniversary of Combat Rock, and so you rock the Casbah and be kind to each other and rock on.